There are people walking among you who nothing can touch. Not insults, not betrayal, not loss. They've built something inside their minds that the rest of the world hasn't figured out yet. And tonight, you're going to learn how they did it. This isn't about positive thinking or morning routines. This is about psychological architecture. The kind that turns your mind into a fortress where chaos cannot enter and weakness cannot survive. You already know something is wrong. You feel it every time someone's words ruin your entire day. Every time anxiety hijacks your thoughts at 3 in the morning. Every time you make a promise to yourself and break it before sunset. Your mind has become a battleground, and you're losing. Not because you're weak, but because no one ever taught you the laws. The 12 laws that separate those who crumble from those who cannot be broken. This isn't motivation. Motivation is sugar. It spikes, crashes. It leaves you right back where you started. This is something else entirely. This is mental reprogramming, psychological rewiring, the kind of transformation that happens in the dark, in the quiet, where no one is watching and no one is cheering. Where you face the parts of yourself you've been running from and you don't blink. The ancient Stoics understood something modern psychology is only now beginning to validate through neuroscience. Your mind is not fixed. It's not a prison you're sentenced to for life. It's architecture. And architecture can be redesigned, reinforced, fortified. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, "The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." He wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was describing a neurological reality. Your brain physically restructures itself based on what you repeatedly expose it to, what you repeatedly practice, what you repeatedly believe about yourself. But here's what they don't tell you. Here's the part that gets left out of every self-help book and every therapy session and every inspirational post. Building a fortress mind isn't comfortable. It's not Instagram-worthy. There's no before and after photo. There's only before and during. Because the building never stops. The fortification is eternal. The moment you think you've arrived is the moment the walls start to crack. Right now, your mind is permeable. Thoughts leak in without permission. Emotions flood in without warning. Other people's opinions, other people's judgments, other people's energy, it all gets inside. And once it's inside, it controls you. You react instead of respond. You defend instead of observe. You collapse instead of stand. The 12 laws you're about to learn aren't theory. They're not philosophy. They're operational principles. Think of them as the blueprints for psychological invincibility. Not the kind where nothing hurts. The kind where hurt doesn't control you, where pain doesn't define you, where chaos doesn't derail you. Some of these laws will feel impossible at first. Your mind will resist. It will tell you it's too hard, too cold, too much. That resistance is proof you need them. The medicine that tastes bitter is usually the medicine that heals. You're about to discover why some people walk through the same fire that destroys everyone else and emerge not just unburned, but stronger. Why some people lose everything and rebuild. Why some people get betrayed and become wiser instead of bitter. Why some people face their darkness and integrate it instead of hiding from it. By the end of this, you won't be the same person you are right now. You can't unhear what you're about to hear. You can't unknow what you're about to know. And if you apply even half of these laws, people will start to notice something different about you. They won't be able to name it, but they'll feel it. A density, a weight, presence that wasn't there before. This is the fortress mind. 12 laws that make you psychologically untouchable. Let's begin. The first law. Sovereignty of perception. You don't see reality. You never have. You see your interpretation of reality, filtered through every wound you've ever received, every fear you've ever felt, every story you've ever told yourself about who you are. And that interpretation controls everything. Your emotions, your decisions, your identity, your entire existence is built on something that exists only in your mind. Most people never realize this. They think their thoughts are facts. They think their feelings are evidence. They think their perception is objective truth. It's not. It never was. And that's the greatest gift you'll ever receive. Because if perception creates your reality, then changing your perception changes everything. Here's what happens in the untrained mind. Someone criticizes you. Immediately, your brain interprets this as, I'm not good enough. I'm being attacked. I need to defend myself or collapse. The criticism becomes a threat. The threat triggers cortisol. Cortisol floods your system. Now you're angry or hurt or ashamed. Now you're reacting. Now you've given your power to someone else's words. But here's the reframe. Here's the law. That same criticism can be interpreted as interesting. They have a perspective. It may contain useful information or it may not. I'll examine it objectively and extract what serves me. Same stimulus. Different interpretation. Different neurological response. Different emotional outcome. Different life. You tell yourself you'll start controlling your reactions tomorrow. You tell yourself you'll stop taking things personally next time. But you don't, because you haven't understood the fundamental truth. You can't control what happens to you. You can only control the story you tell yourself about what happens to you. The fortress mind sees everything as neutral until interpreted. Someone yells at you? Neutral. Someone betrays you? Neutral. Someone rejects you? Neutral. Not because these things don't matter, but because their meaning is not inherent. Their meaning is assigned. And if you're assigning the meaning, you control the emotional impact. This is cognitive sovereignty. This is the first law. This is where psychological invincibility begins. In the space between what happens and what it means. That space is where you build your fortress. That space is where you become untouchable. Practice this. The next time something happens that normally ruins your day, pause. Say out loud, what is the most empowering interpretation of this situation? Force your brain to find one. First, it will feel like lying to yourself. The second law. Emotional ALCHMY. Your emotions are not the enemy. Suppressing them is not strength. Denying them is not control. But letting them control you is slavery. The fortress mind doesn't eliminate emotion. Transmutes it. Takes rage and converts it into fuel. Takes pain and converts it into wisdom. It takes fear and converts it into clarity. Most people are either controlled by their emotions or terrified of them. They swing between explosion and suppression, between breakdown and numbness. Neither is mastery. Neither is freedom. True emotional control is alchemy. It's the ability to feel everything and be ruled by nothing. Here's the mechanism. When an emotion arises, anger, sadness, anxiety, shame, your brain is trying to tell you something. It's information. It's data. But most people never get the message because they're too busy drowning in the feeling. They become the anger instead of observing the anger. They become the fear instead of examining the fear. They identify with the emotion instead of studying it. The trained mind does something different. Creates separation. Not emotional numbness. Not detachment from feeling, but detachment from identity. You feel the rage burning in your chest. But you don't say, I am angry. You say, I am experiencing anger. 3 words. But those 3 words create a gap. And in that gap you have power. You've been taught that emotions are involuntary. That they happen to you. That you're their victim. It's a lie. Not the feeling itself, that part is involuntary. But what you do with the feeling, how long you stay in it, what meaning you assign to it, what action you take because of it, that's entirely under your control. Once you realize that, everything changes. Think about the last time you were truly angry. Really feel it. Your jaw clenched. Your heart pounded. Your vision narrowed. Your thoughts became violent. And in that moment, the anger felt like truth. Felt like the only possible response. But it wasn't. It was just one option. One interpretation. One possible neurological pathway among thousands. The fortress mind learns to pause in the middle of emotional intensity. Not to suppress. Not to judge. Just to observe. This is cortisol. This is adrenaline. This is my amygdala hijacking my prefrontal cortex. This is temporary. This is chemicals. This is not truth. And with that observation, the spell breaks. The emotion is still there. but it no longer owns you. Here's the practice. The next time you feel intense emotion, don't act. Don't speak. Don't react. Sit with it. Breathe into it. Study it like a scientist examining a specimen. Where do you feel it in your body? What thoughts accompany it? What story is your mind telling you about why you should feel this way? Just observe. Just witness. And watch what happens. The emotion peaks. Then it begins to subside. Because that's what emotions do. They rise. They crest. They fall. Unless you feed them with rumination and reaction. This is emotional alchemy. This is the second law. This is how you feel everything and let none of it destroy you. You don't build a fortress by denying your humanity. You build it by mastering your humanity. By taking every emotion and asking, what is this teaching me? What can I extract from this? How can I use this? Pain becomes purpose. Anger becomes determination. Fear becomes preparation. Nothing is wasted in the fortress mind. Everything is fuel. The third law. The discipline of silence. Words are weapons you use against yourself. Every time you complain, you weaken. Every time you explain, you diminish. Every time you defend, you reveal vulnerability. The fortress mind speaks less and impacts more. Because it understands that silence is not emptiness. Silence is compressed power. You talk too much. Everyone does. Not because you have something to say, but because you're uncomfortable with the space, the gap, the unknown. So you fill it. You explain yourself to people who don't deserve an explanation. You defend yourself to people who've already judged you. You share your plans with people who will never support them. And every time you speak, you leak energy. Watch how much time you spend talking about what you're going to do instead of doing it. Watch how much time you spend explaining who you are instead of becoming who you are. Watch how much time you spend defending your choices to people whose opinions shouldn't matter. That's the leak. That's where your power drains. Through your mouth. The fortress mind learns the discipline of silence. Not because it has nothing to say, but because it has learned that most battles don't require words. Most provocations don't deserve responses. Most judgments don't need corrections. Silence is the response that drives people insane. Because they can't decode it. They can't control it. They can't diminish it. Someone insults you. Your instinct is to defend, to explain, to prove them wrong. But here's what the fortress mind knows. Your response validates their attack. Your explanation reveals that their words penetrated. Your defense proves they found a wound. Silence says, you're not even registered as a threat. Silence says, your opinion is so irrelevant I won't waste breath on it. Silence says, I am untouchable. This isn't about being cold. This isn't about being dismissive. This is about energy conservation. This is about strategic communication. This is about understanding that your words should be rare, precise, and deliberate. When you speak, people should lean in. Not because you're entertaining, but because you don't waste sound. Because every word carries weight. Here's the practice. For the next 7 days, reduce your speaking by half. Before you speak, ask yourself, is this necessary? Is this adding value? Is this leaking energy? If the answer is no, stay silent. Watch what happens. Watch how people suddenly listen more carefully when you do speak. Watch how much energy you conserve. Watch how much mental clarity you gain. Watch how much more powerful you become. The fortress mind doesn't explain itself to a world that's already made up its mind. It doesn't defend itself to people who are looking for weaknesses. It doesn't share its plans with people who are hoping to see it fail. It moves in silence. It builds in silence. It transforms in silence. And then it appears already changed, already fortified, already beyond the reach. The fortress mind does something radical. Something your biology resists. It seeks discomfort deliberately, systematically, daily. Not because it enjoys suffering, but because it understands that psychological resilience is built exactly the same way physical strength is built. Through progressive overload. Through intentional stress. Through voluntary hardship. Here's what happens when you eliminate all discomfort from your life. Your nervous system recalibrates. What used to be normal now feels unbearable. A cold shower becomes torture. A difficult conversation becomes traumatic. An unexpected challenge becomes a crisis. You become fragile without realizing it. You become glass pretending to be steel. But here's the reversal. Here's the law. When you expose yourself to voluntary discomfort regularly, systematically, religiously, your nervous system expands. Your tolerance increases. Your resilience multiplies. What used to break you now barely registers. Not because the world got easier, but because you got harder. Think about the cold shower. 5 seconds under cold water feels like death. Your body screams. Your mind panics. Every cell begs you to stop. But you don't. You breathe. You stay. And after 30 seconds, something shifts. The cold is still cold, but you're no longer controlled by it. You're experiencing it without being destroyed by it. That's not just physical adaptation. That's neurological reprogramming. You just taught your brain that discomfort is survivable, that panic is optional, that you can override your instincts with your will. Now apply that principle to everything. The difficult conversation you're avoiding, that's your cold shower. The workout you don't feel like doing, that's your cold shower. The project that terrifies you, that's your cold shower. And every time you choose discomfort over comfort, every time you override your biology with your discipline, you add another layer to your fortress. You become a little more unbreakable. Here's the practice. Create a discomfort protocol. Every single day, do one thing that makes you uncomfortable. Something small. Something deliberate. Cold water. Extended fasting. The conversation you're dreading. The apology you need to make. The boundary you need to set. Make it systematic. Make it non-negotiable. Make it religious. The fortress mind doesn't wait for discomfort to arrive. It invites it, schedules it, it weaponizes it, because it knows that the only difference between those who collapse under pressure and those who thrive under pressure is exposure. The person who's never practiced discomfort crumbles. The person who practices it daily becomes antifragile. Becomes something pressure can't break. You're not building comfort. You're building capacity. And capacity is built in the space where you're uncomfortable but not overwhelmed. That's the zone. That's where transformation happens. That's where the fortress rises. The fifth law. Severance of Validation. When you are addicted to approval, don't deny it. You check how many people liked your post. You replay conversations to see if you said the right thing. You change your behavior based on how others might perceive you. You need people to validate that you're good, smart, worthy, enough. And that addiction is the crack in your fortress. That's where they get in. That's how they control you. The fortress mind severs this dependency completely. Not because it doesn't care what people think, but because it understands that external validation is a rigged game you can never win. There will always be someone who disapproves. There will always be someone who judges. There will always be someone who sees your best and calls it mediocre. If you need their approval to feel whole, you'll spend your entire life begging for crumbs from tables you should have never approached. Here's the mechanism that keeps you trapped. Every time you seek external validation and receive it, your brain releases dopamine. Feels good. Feels like proof. Feels like you matter. So you seek it again and again. And the more you seek it, the more you need it. The dopamine hit gets smaller. The void gets bigger. Now you're not living your life. You're performing it, curating it, editing it for an audience that doesn't actually care about you. But here's the deeper cut. Here's the part that really hurts. When you need validation from others, you give them control over your emotional state. They become the switch that turns your happiness on and off. They become the authority on whether you're enough. And you, the person living your life, the person who actually knows your context, your struggles, your growth, you become a beggar at someone else's judgment throne. The fortress mind makes a surgical cut. It severs the line between self-worth and other people's opinions. Not because those opinions are meaningless, but because they're not definitive. They're data points, perspectives, reflections of someone else's wounds, biases, and limitations. They might be useful. They might contain truth, but they're never the whole truth, and they're certainly not your truth. You tell yourself you don't care what people think. But you do. Everyone does. The difference is whether you let it control you, whether you let it define you, whether you let it stop you. Here's the practice. The next time you feel the need for validation, pause. Notice the feeling. Notice the hunger. Notice the voice that says, I need them to approve of this. And then ask yourself, if no one ever knew about this, if no one ever validated this, if no one ever acknowledged this, would I still do it? Would it still matter? If the answer is no, you're not doing it for yourself. You're performing. And performance is exhausting. And performance is fragile. And performance is not a fortress. Build your validation system internally. Become your own authority. You know when you've done your best. You know when you've been courageous. You know when you've honored your values. That's the only approval that matters. That's the only validation that lasts. That's the only foundation that can't be shaken by someone else's opinion. The fortress mind doesn't seek applause. It doesn't need recognition. It doesn't require external confirmation of its worth. It operates from internal alignment. It moves according to its own compass. And when people criticize, when people judge, when people disapprove, it doesn't even flinch. Because their opinion was never part of the equation. Sever the line. Reclaim your power. Become the sole authority on your worth. That's the fifth law. That's how you become untouchable. The sixth law. Integration of SHADOW. You have parts of yourself you've disowned, buried, denied. The anger you pretend isn't there. The selfishness you call something else. The cruelty you're capable of but refuse to acknowledge. The darkness inside you that you've spent your whole life running from. And as long as those parts remain in shadow, as long as they remain unintegrated, they control you. They leak out sideways. They sabotage you. They own you. This is the law most people never learn. Most people never even hear about, because it's uncomfortable, because it destroys the story you've told yourself about being a good person, because it requires looking at the parts of yourself you've labeled as unacceptable and saying, this is mine, this is me, this is part of my wholeness. Carl Jung understood this. He called it shadow work. He said, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. Translation: the parts of yourself you refuse to acknowledge don't disappear. They grow stronger in the dark. They become more powerful. They wait for moments of stress, moments of weakness, moments of crisis, and then they emerge. Uncontrolled, explosive, destructive. You've experienced this. You've had moments where you acted in ways that shocked you, where you said things you didn't mean to say, where something came out of you that felt foreign, that felt like it wasn't really you. But it was you. It's always been you. It's just the part you refused to integrate, the part you locked away, the part that's been building pressure until it exploded. The fortress mind does something radical. It stops running from its darkness. It doesn't celebrate it. It doesn't indulge it. But it acknowledges it. It studies it. It integrates it. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to hear. You cannot be truly strong without acknowledging your capacity for weakness. You cannot be truly kind without acknowledging your capacity for cruelty. You cannot be truly whole without acknowledging all the parts you've been taught to hide. This is not permission to act on your darkness. This is not justification for harmful behavior. This is about ownership, about removing the mask, about looking at yourself completely, without illusion, without judgment, and saying, I contain multitudes. I have light and shadow. I have strength and weakness. I have nobility and ugliness. And all of it is mine. Here's what happens when you integrate your shadow. You stop being at war with yourself. You stop using all your energy to maintain an image that isn't complete. You stop being surprised by your own reactions. You stop being controlled by parts of yourself you refuse to see. You become integrated, whole, dangerous in the best way, because you know what you're capable of. You know your own darkness, and you choose not to act from it. That's real power. That's real control. Here's the practice. Write down every quality you despise in others, every trait that triggers you, every behavior that makes you judge. Write them all down. Now here's the hard part. Look for those same qualities in yourself, not as they appear in others, but in their subtle forms in you. The selfishness that shows up as self-care, the manipulation that shows up as persuasion, the cowardice that shows up as choosing peace. Find them, acknowledge them, own them. This is integration. This is shadow work. This is the sixth law. And it's the difference between someone who's pretending to be strong and someone who's actually unbreakable. Because when you know your own darkness, when you've integrated it, when you've made peace with all the parts of yourself you were told to hide, nothing can be used against you. There's no secret shame, no hidden weakness, no shadow someone else can expose. Because you've already looked, you've already seen, you've already integrated. The fortress mind is built on wholeness, not perfection. And wholeness requires seeing everything, even the parts you wish weren't there. The seventh law, temporal dominance. You don't live in the present. You live in regret about the past and anxiety about the future. Your mind is everywhere except where you actually are, where your body is, where your power is, where the only moment that actually exists is. And that fragmentation is killing you. It's draining your energy. It's sabotaging your decisions. It's making you weak in the only moment where you can be strong. Most people are time schizophrenics. Their body is in the present. Their mind is in yesterday or tomorrow. They're having a conversation but replaying last week's argument. They're working on a project but worrying about next month's deadline. They're with their family but somewhere else entirely. They're never fully here, never fully present, never fully alive. The fortress mind achieves temporal dominance. Not through spiritual practice or meditation retreats, but through understanding a simple neurological fact. The past is memory. The future is imagination. Neither one exists anywhere except in your mind. The only thing that actually exists, the only thing that's real, the only moment where you have any power whatsoever, is right now. And if you're not here, you're not anywhere. Here's what happens when your mind lives in the past. You replay what you should have said, what you should have done, how things should have been different. Your brain releases cortisol, your body tenses, your mood darkens, and none of it changes anything. Nothing about the past, nothing about the present. You're just torturing yourself with a memory. That's not reflection. That's rumination. That's psychological self-harm. Here's what happens when your mind lives in the future. You worry about what might happen, what could go wrong, how you might fail. Your amygdala activates. Your body prepares for threats that don't exist yet and might never exist. Your nervous system stays in fight or flight mode. That's not preparation. That's anxiety. That's your mind destroying your present by obsessing over a future that hasn't happened. The fortress mind collapses time into now. Not because the past doesn't matter. Not because the future isn't important. But because you cannot change the past from yesterday and you cannot live the future from tomorrow. The only moment where you have any agency, any control, any power is this one. Right now. This breath. This choice. This second. You tell yourself you'll be present once things calm down. Once you finish this project. This is all there is. The fortress mind lives here. Fully. Completely. Not because it's easy, but because it's the only place where power exists. The only place where transformation happens. The only place where you're actually alive. The eighth law. Strategic isolation. You're surrounded by people who are making you weaker. Not because they're malicious, but because they're unconscious. They complain and it seeps into you. They make excuses and you start making excuses. They settle for mediocrity and suddenly mediocrity looks acceptable. You think you're immune. You think you're strong enough to resist the influence. You're not. Nobody is. Your environment is either building you or breaking you. There's no neutral. The fortress mind understands a brutal truth. Most relationships are energy leaks. Not because people are bad, but because most people are operating at a frequency that drags you down instead of pulling you up. They're drowning, and drowning people pull others under. It's not personal. It's survival instinct. But that doesn't mean you have to drown with them. Here's what happens when you don't protect your environment. You start to normalize dysfunction. The friend who always plays victim starts to sound reasonable. The family member who never takes responsibility starts to sound like they have a point. The colleague who gossips and complains starts to feel like they're just being real. Your standards lower. Your tolerance for weakness increases. Your fortress starts to crack. Not from direct assault, but from slow erosion. From proximity to people who are not committed to their own growth. This is the law that makes people uncomfortable. Because it sounds cold. Because it sounds harsh. Because it requires making decisions that feel selfish. But here's the reality. You cannot build a fortress mind while surrounded by people who are committed to staying broken. You cannot rise while carrying people who refuse to climb. You cannot transform while maintaining relationships with people who need you to stay the same. Strategic isolation doesn't mean becoming a hermit. It doesn't mean cutting off everyone who isn't perfect. It means becoming radically selective about who has access to your time, your energy, your mental space. It means understanding that every person in your life is either contributing to your growth or contaminating it. And the ones who are contaminating it, they have to go. Or you have to limit their access so severely that their influence becomes negligible. You tell yourself you can handle it. You tell yourself you're strong enough to be around negative people and not be affected. But your brain doesn't work that way. Mirror neurons fire whether you want them to or not. Emotional contagion happens whether you're aware of it or not. The energy you're around becomes the energy you embody. You can't out-willpower neuroscience. You can't out-discipline environment. Here's the practice. Audit your relationships, every single one, and ask yourself, is this person making me stronger or weaker? Am I better after I spend time with them or worse? Do they challenge me to grow or comfort me into stagnation? Be honest. Brutally honest, and then make decisions, hard decisions, the kind that make you feel guilty, the kind that other people judge you for, the kind that separate you from the herd. The fortress mind surrounds itself with people who are also building fortresses, people who are committed to growth, people who hold you accountable instead of enabling you, people who celebrate your progress and challenge your excuses, not because they're perfect, but because they're committed. Because they're conscious. Because they're building something instead of complaining about everything. This will cost you relationships. This will cost you popularity. This will make some people angry. Good. That's the price of transformation. That's the cost of building something real. That's what separates those who talk about change from those who embody it. Strategic isolation is not cruelty. It's self-preservation. It's understanding that your mind is being shaped by everything around it. And if you want to build a fortress, you need to control what gets in. The ninth law, controlled aggression. You've been taught that anger is bad, that aggression is toxic, that you should be calm, peaceful, agreeable at all times. And that teaching has made you weak. Because anger isn't the enemy. Uncontrolled anger is the enemy. Aggression isn't the problem. Misdirected aggression is the problem. The fortress mind doesn't eliminate these forces. It channels them. It weaponizes them. Turns them into fuel. Think about the last time you were truly motivated. Really motivated. Underneath that motivation was probably anger. Anger at your current situation. Anger at being underestimated. Anger at wasting time. Anger at not being who you could be. That anger was energy. Pure, concentrated energy. And if you channeled it correctly, it propelled you forward. If you suppressed it or let it explode randomly, it destroyed you. The fortress mind understands that aggression is neutral. It's a force. Like electricity. Channel it correctly and it powers your entire life. Let it run wild and it burns everything down. The weak suppress it and then wonder why they have no drive. The unconscious let it explode and then wonder why they're surrounded by destruction. The fortress mind controls it, directs it, uses it. Here's how controlled aggression works. You feel the anger rising, the situation that's not acceptable, the person who crossed a boundary, the circumstance that's testing you. Normal people either explode or suppress. The fortress mind does neither. It observes the anger, feels the energy, and then it asks, how can I use this? What can this power? Where should this be directed? Maybe it gets directed at a workout. Maybe it gets directed at work. Maybe it gets directed at a project you've been delaying. The anger doesn't disappear, transforms. It becomes drive. It becomes intensity. It becomes the edge that makes you dangerous, formidable, unstoppable. You tell yourself you're not an angry person. You tell yourself you don't have aggression. You're lying. Everyone has it. It's biological. It's hardwired. It's the part of you that's designed to fight, to compete, to dominate when necessary. The question isn't whether you have it. The question is whether you're channeling it or whether it's channeling you. Here's what happens when you suppress aggression completely. You become passive. You become a doormat. People walk over you and you smile through it. You tell yourself you're being spiritual. You're being evolved. You're being the bigger person. But really you're just scared. Here's the practice. The next time you feel anger or aggression rising, don't act on it immediately. Don't suppress it either. Just notice it. Feel where it lives in your body. Notice the energy. Then ask, what would be the most productive use of this force right now? Maybe it's having a difficult conversation. Maybe it's setting a boundary. Maybe it's channeling it into something physical. Use the energy. Don't waste it on random outbursts or toxic suppression. Controlled aggression is what makes you dangerous. Not dangerous to others. Dangerous to mediocrity. Dangerous to obstacles. Dangerous to anything standing between you and who you're becoming. The fortress mind doesn't apologize for this force. It harnesses it. Because without it, you're just another person drifting through life hoping things work out. The 10th law, death meditation, you're going to die. Not eventually. Not someday. Sooner than you think. And you have no idea when. Could be 50 years. Could be 50 days. Could be today. And every moment you spend procrastinating, complaining, playing small, settling for less, that's a moment you're stealing from yourself. That's a moment you'll never get back. That's a piece of your life you've chosen to waste. Most people live like they're immortal, like time is infinite, like there's always tomorrow to become who they're meant to be. And that delusion is the most expensive lie they'll ever believe, because it creates a life of perpetual delay, of endless preparation, of waiting for the perfect moment that never comes. And then suddenly it's over, and they never became, they never did, they never lived. They just survived until they didn't. The fortress mind meditates on death. Not morbidly, not depressively, but practically, as a tool, as a filter, as a way to eliminate everything that doesn't matter and amplify everything that does. Because when you truly accept your mortality, when you truly internalize that your time is limited and precious and unrecoverable, you stop tolerating bullshit. You stop accepting mediocrity. You stop living according to other people's expectations. The Stoics practiced this. They called it memento mori. Remember you must die. Not to be sad. Not to be pessimistic. But to be awake. To be present. To understand that this moment right now is all you have. This is not a rehearsal. This is not a dress rehearsal. This is it. This is your life. And it's disappearing second by second whether you're living it or not. Think about someone you know who died unexpectedly. Think about all the things they didn't get to do. All the words they didn't get to say. All the dreams they didn't get to chase. Now realize that you're in exactly the same situation. You just don't know when your clock runs out. You're operating under the illusion of unlimited time. And that illusion is destroying your urgency, your intensity, your willingness to take risks and make moves and become who you could be. You tell yourself you'll start tomorrow. You'll make the change next week. You'll take the leap next year. But you're lying. You're not planning. You're avoiding. You're using the future as a dumping ground for everything you're too scared to do right now. And every day you do that, you're choosing to stay small. You're choosing comfort over growth. You're choosing safety over aliveness. Here's the practice. Every single morning, before you do anything else, remind yourself, I will die. Not to be morbid, but to be honest. To cut through the fog of distraction and comfort and fake urgency. To ask yourself, if I only had a year left, would I spend today doing this? If I only had a month left, would I waste time on this? If I only had a week left, would these problems still matter? Use death as a filter. Use it as a lens. Use it as a tool to separate what's real from what's noise. The fortress mind doesn't fear death. It uses death as motivation, as perspective, as a reminder that this isn't practice. This is the game. This is your one shot. And every moment you spend half asleep, half engaged, half alive is a moment you'll never get back. Death meditation isn't about becoming dark or nihilistic. It's about becoming awake. About understanding that your time is the only non-renewable resource you have. You can make more money. You can find new relationships. You can start new careers. But you cannot make more time. Every second is gone forever. And that reality should terrify you into action, into presence, into living like someone who understands that the clock is ticking and no one knows when it stops. Memento mori. Remember you must die. So live like someone who knows it. The 11th law. Pain as education. Pain is not punishment. Pain is information. Every moment of suffering you've experienced, every wound you've received, every failure you've endured, it was trying to teach you something. Most people never learn because they're too busy avoiding the lesson. They numb the pain. They distract from it. They blame others for it. And so they repeat the same patterns, make the same mistakes, attract the same situations over and over until they break. The fortress mind has a different relationship with pain. It doesn't seek it, but it doesn't run from it either. It interrogates it, studies it. It extracts the lesson and integrates it so the same pain never has to be experienced twice. This is how you turn your wounds into wisdom, your trauma into strength, your suffering into mastery. Think about the last time something really hurt. Betrayal, rejection, failure, loss. In that moment, your brain was looking for someone to blame, something to rage against, some way to make sense of the chaos. But underneath all that noise, underneath the emotional storm, there was a signal, a message, a lesson trying to emerge. Most people never hear it. They're too loud with their victimhood, too busy with their blame, too consumed by their pain to actually learn from it. The fortress mind does something different. When pain arrives, it creates space. Not immediately. In the moment, it feels. It allows the full weight of the suffering. It doesn't suppress. It doesn't pretend. But after the initial impact, after the shock subsides, it asks, what is this teaching me? What did I miss? What do I need to change? What boundary did I fail to set? What illusion did I need to lose? Here's the mechanism. Every pain points to something. Sometimes it points to a boundary violation. You allowed something you shouldn't have allowed. Sometimes it points to a false expectation. You believed something that wasn't true. Sometimes it points to a weakness. You weren't prepared for something you should have been prepared for. The pain isn't random. It's specific. It's targeted. It's showing you exactly where you need to grow, change, strengthen, evolve. You tell yourself you've learned from your pain. But have you? Because if you have the same pain twice, you didn't learn. You felt. You processed. You moved on. But you didn't extract the actual lesson and integrate it into your operating system. Real learning means the same pain can't touch you again. Real learning means you've updated your internal software so that particular vulnerability no longer exists. Here's the practice. Take your 3 biggest pains from the last 5 years. The ones that really broke you. The ones you still think about. Write them down. Now ask, what was this trying to teach me? What did I need to learn? What did I need to change? Don't blame. Don't justify. Don't make yourself the victim. Extract the lesson, the actionable, specific lesson. And then ask, have I actually implemented this lesson? Or am I still operating in the same way that created that pain? The fortress mind sees pain as tuition. It's expensive. It's brutal. But it's only wasted if you don't learn from it. If you let the same pattern repeat. If you stay in victimhood instead of moving into mastery. Every person who betrayed you taught you something about boundaries, about discernment, about who deserves access to you. Every failure taught you something about preparation, about strategy, about what doesn't work. Every loss taught you something about attachment, about impermanence, about what actually matters. Pain is the greatest teacher you'll ever have. But only if you're willing to be taught. Only if you're willing to stop blaming and start learning. Only if you're willing to let suffering transform you instead of define you. The 11th law is this: pain is education. And the fortress mind is built by those who refuse to repeat the same class twice. The 12th law. Identity architecture. You are not who you think you are. You're a collection of stories you've been telling yourself for so long you forgot their stories. I'm not good at this. I'm the kind of person who struggles with that. This is just who I am. And every one of those stories is a chain, a limitation you've accepted, a boundary you've drawn around your potential that you call personality but is really just programming. The fortress mind understands something radical. Identity is not discovered. Identity is constructed, architected, built deliberately by the choices you make repeatedly until those choices become automatic, until they become who you are. You're not born as anything. You become. And what you become is determined by what you practice, what you believe about yourself, what you're willing to let go of. Here's the trap most people fall into. They identify with their weaknesses. I'm anxious. I'm lazy. I'm bad with money. I'm not a morning person. And the moment you say, I am, before something, you lock it in. You cement it. You make it true. Because your brain doesn't know the difference between what you are and what you believe you are. If you believe you're anxious, your brain will find evidence for that belief. It will create experiences that confirm it. It will resist anything that contradicts it. Because the brain values consistency over truth. The fortress mind does something different. It treats identity as malleable, as something to be designed, not discovered. It asks, who do I need to become to build the life I want? What characteristics would that person have? What beliefs would they hold? How would they respond to challenges? And then it starts acting as if it's already that person. Not fake, not pretending, but trying on the identity like a suit until the suit becomes skin. This is identity architecture. This is the 12th law. This is how you stop being a passive recipient of whatever conditioning you received and start becoming the architect of who you are. You choose your identity based on where you want to go. And then you reinforce it with every decision, every action, every response until it's no longer something you're trying to be. It's something you've become. Think about who you were 5 years ago. You're different now, not because time passed, but because you made different choices. You had different experiences. You told yourself different stories. You proved to yourself that change is possible, that you're not fixed, that you're not permanent. You're always in process. Always becoming. So here's the question. If you're always becoming, if identity is always under construction, why not be intentional about what you're building? Why accept the default? Why settle for the hand-me-down personality you inherited from your upbringing, your culture, your wounds? Why not decide who you want to be and start practicing that identity until it becomes true? Here's the practice. Define your future identity, not your goals. Not what you want to achieve, but who you need to become to achieve those things naturally. Write down, I am someone who, and complete that sentence with characteristics, behaviors, beliefs. I am someone who keeps promises to myself. I am someone who faces difficulty without complaining. I am someone who values discipline over comfort. Write them all down, and then start acting as if those statements are already true. Not someday. Right now, today. The fortress mind is not built by someone who is already strong. It's built by someone who decides to become strong and then acts accordingly until acting strong becomes being strong. Until the performance becomes reality. Until the architecture is complete. You are not stuck with who you are. You're not limited by your history. You're not defined by your past patterns. You're only limited by what you're willing to believe about yourself and what you're willing to practice until it becomes automatic. Identity is architecture, and you're the architect. That's the 12th law. That's the final piece. Build yourself deliberately. Design yourself strategically. Become yourself intentionally. You've heard them now. All 12 laws. The blueprint for a fortress mind. The architecture of psychological invincibility. The principles that separate those who break from those who bend but never shatter. These are not theories. These are not philosophies. These are operational realities. The people you admire, the ones who seem untouchable, the ones who move through chaos with clarity, they're not special. They're not gifted. They're not lucky. They just learned these laws. They practiced them. They integrated them until they became automatic. Until they became identity. You have the same capacity, the same potential, the same neuroplasticity. The only question is whether you'll do anything with it. Whether you'll take these laws and actually apply them, or whether you'll hear them, feel momentarily inspired, and return to the same patterns that have been keeping you weak. Here's what happens if you implement even half of these laws. In 3 months, you won't recognize yourself. In 6 months, other people won't recognize you. In a year, you'll look back at who you are right now and wonder how you ever lived that way. Not because you'll be perfect, but because you'll be fortified. Because you'll have built something inside yourself that nothing can penetrate. No insult, no rejection, no failure, no loss, nothing. The fortress mind isn't about never feeling pain. It's about pain not owning you. It's about experiencing every emotion but being controlled by none. It's about facing every challenge and finding the lesson, the strength, the opportunity hidden inside. It's about becoming someone who can walk through fire and emerge not burned but refined. You've always had this power. You just forgot how to access it. You just got conditioned out of it. You just accepted the lie that you're fragile, that you're vulnerable, that you need protection from the world. You don't need protection. You need fortification. And fortification comes from within. From the laws, from the practice, from the daily, unglamorous work of building something real. So here's your choice. You can close this and go back to the version of yourself that feels everything too deeply, that's controlled by circumstances, that's at the mercy of other people's opinions and actions. Or you can take one law, just one, and start practicing it today, right now, this moment, and then tomorrow practice it again, and the next day, and the next. Until it's not practice anymore. Until it's just who you are. Master your mind before it masters you. Build your fortress before the siege arrives. Become untouchable before you're tested. Because the test is coming. It always comes. And when it does, you'll either have a fortress or you'll have rubble. The laws are yours now. The knowledge is transferred. What you do with it determines everything. You are the architect. The fortress awaits. Build.